Hi, my name is Dan Vito. This is Fireborn Studios, and this demonstration is on trimming. So the first thing is we're going to dry your pots to approximately leather hard. And if they're not quite dry enough, you're going to need to bring them over to this bag, turn them upside down, put the fan on them for a while, and get them to the right consistency. And when you bring them over here, there's very often crumbs on the bag. So make sure that you scrape the bag off and it's nice and clean. And what you're looking for is when you pinch the bottom of the pot and get a little piece of clay off, it should be not crunchy, but it should be firm. You shouldn't be able to like roll it up into a coil and flex it a whole lot. You know, it shouldn't be like fresh clay. So you can see as I'm squeezing here, it's fairly firm. That's what you're looking for. And pots always dry from the lip down, so it's pretty typical for a pot to be pretty dry up here and still be pretty wet down there. And that's why when we dry your pots for you, we turn them upside down. So swing around so they can see that table. So you see we've got all your pots upside down. We waited until they were half dry, then we flipped them so that the bottoms catch up. Okay, so I'm going to take these 4 pots, and these are examples of 4 different shapes. I'm going to trim them all, and then I'm going to show you some samples of pots that are cut in half and things that you can do to facilitate your trimming, so when it comes time to trim you can do a better job. And I should point out that when a potter walks into a shop and sees a whole bunch of pots, you know, the potter might be attracted first off to form or glaze or decoration, but you can be assured they're going to pick up the pot and they are going to turn it over and look at the bottom, and they're going to assess the weight of the pot, and every potter is going to do that. And the reason I don't sell pots online is, like, I can't imagine buying a pot without touching it. It's such a tactile experience. I'm mystified and horrified that somebody can buy a piece of pottery without actually touching it and looking at the bottom. So we're going to go trim these things. So first off, things like this and this are easy to trim on a wheel, but the others fare better if you trim them using the Giffen grip. So I'm going to take these over to the wheel and we'll get started on these. So now I'm going to trim a pot over here on the wheel. First thing is, you don't want the bat on the wheel because the clay that I use to anchor that pot is not going to stick to the bat as well as it's going to stick to the aluminum wheel head. So get rid of that. Use the concentric lines on the wheel head to help you position your pot so that it's centered. Look directly down on it, wiggle it around. Okay, now when I spin this, it should be pretty centered. I'm checking with my finger on the side, and you can see that it's not absolutely centered, but it's pretty darn close. Now I'm going to push it off center, and you can see now when I spin it, it's touching my finger here and way off there. So if I didn't have these circles on the wheel, I would have to, you know, figure out where the center was. So what I do is when it's touching my finger, I stop it, and then I move it half the distance that it was off. So it was off about that much. So I want to move it over that way, about half that distance. And I check it again, and it's better. And I'm going to move it half the distance that it was off, and better yet. And now I'm going to move it half the distance that it was off, and it's just about perfect. And what you're going to discover is if your pots aren't round to begin with, getting them centered is somewhat challenging. Also, if the lips are uneven, it's a problem, because if the lip is higher on one side than the other side, your pot is going to be sitting like this. So even though the lip may be more or less centered, the foot is going to be up and down as the pot spins. Anyway, here we are, the pot's centered. Now we need to anchor it down so we can trim it. So you only need 3 pieces of clay, and I'm going to get them made. So here's my 3 little pieces. I roll them into a little ball, and then I make them that shape. I do that to all 3 of them. Okay, now I'm going to use those to hold the pot down. Just like when you throw, you want to get a little water on the bat before you start to throw your clay down so the clay sticks to the bat. You want to get some water here. But you don't want these to stick to the side of your pot, so you don't want to get water on the side of the pot. You want to get water on the wheel head. So I'm going to take a sponge, and I'm just going to put a little water right on the wheel head, and not on the pot. Very little water. The sponge is almost dry. Now I have to hold this pot still, put this right here, and squish it down. Hold the pot still, push that down there, and then I put this one over here. So that when I look down on this, it's in thirds. And you can kind of think of this as Mickey Mouse, because here's his ears and here's his chin. Isn't that cute? Okay. So the trim tool that I like to use is this. And it's a KSP4. It's different than the one that comes with your kit. This is wider here, and I think it's much nicer. I'm going to back up again a bit. Before you put your pot on the wheel, you need a plan. You need to know the shape of the inside, the approximate weight, some idea of whether you are going to be taking off a lot of clay or a little, and where you're going to take it off. So once you have that plan, then you execute. So we're going to anchor this down again. It's probably not centered. We'll see. That's pretty good. Okay. So what I need to do, because I looked at the inside shape and it had a nice curve this way, is I need to put a raised foot on this, and I want the outside of the foot to be about over here. So I'm going to make a line which is going to designate where the outside of the foot's going to be. And I make a second line for where the inside of the foot's going to be. And I leave this wider than I need to. I try to err in both directions so there's plenty of room there, and I can fine-tune that later. So after I've scored those 2 lines, the next thing I do is remove all the clay that I'm going to remove here. I don't do anything in here until I've finished here. So I use the corner of the tool, because the corner of the tool digs in and removes a whole lot more clay faster, easier, and with less pressure than the wide flat part. And I also have this, the pinky on the outside, some fingers on the bottom, and the thumb sticking out and touching the metal ferrule of the tool, which stabilizes things. And if you look at my elbows, they're into my trunk and on my thighs. Okay, so this is the body mechanics you need to be braced so that everything's stable. Because sometimes when you put your tool on the pot, the dry clay grabs the tool, jerks it around, and you make a big gouge and gash in your pot. So proper body mechanics, very important to stabilize here. And I'm going to come in to the line, and I'm going to stop when I get there. Okay, wipe that stuff off the bottom so it doesn't interfere with my hand. Now I'm going to start taking the clay off the side. And everybody worries about putting a hole in their pot. Will I make it too thin? Maybe, but you still have to take some off. So I started around the side that defined the outside of the foot. It's not where it needs to be yet because this pot was pretty thick when I threw it. I could tell when I picked it up that I need to take off a lot. So I'm going to cut down deeper here. And then I'm going to start here and I'm going to roll down. And the tool has to rotate So now this foot's sticking up kind of high, but not too high. And I've taken a lot of weight off the outside. And this is basically done. However, should you have lines that you don't like, because sometimes the corner of your tool leaves these kind of lines, sharp lines, that you just wish you didn't have. Okay, so if you have that problem, you can either lightly go over it with this and remove them, and that, because it's wider, that makes it easier. You can get one of these really wide trim tools, and that will give you a much smoother surface. And before you start trimming, you want to wet your tool and clean it off, because if there's dried clay on it, that's going to be a problem. And then using this tool, you can get a nice smooth surface. Okay, now for the inside. So starting here, and again with my left hand, see what it's doing. I'm going to cut down, and then I'm going to work my way in toward the center a little bit and take some more off using the corner of the tool. Then I'm going to go into the center and I'm going to cut down a bit, and I'm going to start dragging the other way. Okay, and now I just need to smooth this off. So far I've been using the corner because, like I said, it requires less pressure and it cuts better. But now I want to make this smooth. So I hold the tool pretty flat and starting in the center, I work my way to the outside. You can see it's looking pretty smooth. And now it is perfectly smooth. My clay is a little bit wet for trimming, it's a little bit gummy. As you can see, I can roll this into a little ball and roll it into a little coil, and I can bend it and it doesn't even crack. So if your clay is this wet, you shouldn't be trimming it. But I was in a hurry to do this demo. Okay, so remember I said I left this a little extra wide and I would fine tune later. The question is, do I want to take off more here or more there? And if I want this bowl to have a more light, ethereal, elegant appearance, I will move in. If I want it to be slightly more functional so that when you are digging in there with a spoon or a fork, it doesn't tip, I would leave it wider. So this bowl to me looks like a kind of a practical fellow. So I'm going to leave it here, and I'm going to take the extra clay off the inside. So now I've got the foot approximately the way I want it, and I'm just smoothing the inside. And so I've got some choices here. If I want to make it a little thinner, I can take some more off. Right now this is straight up and down. In terms of holding it when I glaze it, I could probably grip it because it's fairly high, but if I don't want to ensure that I can get a better grip on this thing when I glaze it, I may want to undercut that a little bit. Like so. So this is going to be easier to hold when I glaze. And now I need to sponge it and clean it up. Full speed. Okay, so that's looking good. And sometimes I come back in here and I put a little circle, which acts as a frame for my signature. So you could either move that circle in and write your name out here, or you could write your name in the middle area there. And I'm going to sponge it one more time lightly to get rid of the little burr from when I made that mark. Okay, so this piece is done. That's how you trim on a wheel. Now I have a plate, which I could trim here as well, if it fits. So there's the finished pot. Okay, so here's the plate. When I made this, there was an air bubble and there's a little void here. And I'm going to fix that now. I'm going to take the tool and just kind of compress in that area. And then I'm going to grab a little tiny piece of clay and some water. I'm going to put some water in there, put that piece of clay in the hole, smush it down, and integrate it. And that's one of the nice things about clay, is you can add bits and pieces very easily. So now it's perfectly on the inside. Now it's not going to work to trim it on here because it happens to be just about landing right on these pins. So I'll have to trim that. This thing here is called the Giffen grip, and I'm going to show you how to set it up. So right now I'm just knocking some of the crumbs out of the inside. Cleaning off the wheel head. I'm going to put this on. These three things here just compress against the side of the wheel, and that's what holds it in place. And if any of these ridges happen to hit these back pins, this won't go down all the way. So you put it on there and you spin it and you check to see if it's level, and it just happens to be level. But sometimes when you put it on there, one side is up, and you can see how that's going up and down. And if that's the case, you need to simply pick it up and move it to a different position and try again and see if it's level. So both times it was level, but sometimes I try 10 times and it's not level, So just make sure it is level. Now, when there are two discs here, upper and lower, and when you spin them independently, the feet go in and out, and they will grab your pot and center it. And in this configuration, there's a foam rubber pad on each of these that will touch the lip of your pot. But if you don't want to grab on the lip of the pot, because maybe it's kind of tall and you want to grab up higher, then you can open all the way out, remove these, turn them around, bring it in, and select whatever feet are appropriate, maybe this size, and you put them in there, and then they will grab onto a taller pot. Now this isn't a very tall pot, but just for the sake of demonstration, you see how they hold that little guy. Okay, so we're gonna trim that plate. Well, first of all, this is configured totally wrong for the plate. So I need to take these out and I need to put them up here carefully where they belong so they don't get lost. Don't just set them someplace on the wheel or whatever. Make sure they go right back where they belong. Then I need to crank this out, turn the feet around, bring it back in. That's going to grip the outside of the plate. Okay. Now, if the plate is wider than this, I have another set of feet that go in this way and can accommodate a wider size plate. Okay, so there's the plate, and like I said before, I don't need to do a whole lot of trimming here. The bottom is the thickness that I want. I'm just going to start here and work on that curve a little bit. I'm not going to put a raised foot on it. I can either bevel, and I'm using the round end, so this actually makes it sort of a concave bevel, which looks nice, or I can roll this off into a gradual curve. I think it works better to have that little bevel because the bevel serves as a defining place to wax to. So I would wax right up to that part right there where that bevel is. And now I just need to smooth off the foot, and I don't want to use this. I'm going to use the big tool, and now I got my big trim tool. And by the way, we talked about defining where you're going to wax to. So on this piece, you're going to wax right to there, and that again defines where you wax. So all I'm trying to do here is skim the bottom. There's, you know, a few bits of crud on there, and I just skim across the bottom, knock everything off. I don't want to hollow this out because I made it the right thickness to begin with. And if you put pressure here, you're going to bow it, and then the plate is going to be humped when you turn it over. Now I just sponge this off. Okay, all done. I can, if I want to, I can remove one of these so that I can slide it off a little better. Pick it up, and when you set it down, make sure that you dust the area on the shelf that you're going to put your plate on so you don't set it down on a bunch of crumbs. And after you set it down, press here to make sure that the bottom is nice and flat. And as you can see, there's some stuff on the lip, so I always sponge the lip when I'm done to make that nice. And one other thing you should know about plates is that when they dry, the lip lifts up. So they do that because as the clay shrinks and the piece gets smaller, it's shrinking more out here where it's exposed than it is here. This section is going to dry more slowly. As it shrinks out here, it can't shrink here as much, so the lip lifts up. And on a large piece, it can lift as much as an inch, which is huge. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to trim these. So this is a taller cylinder kind of shape, and I don't want to trim this on a regular wheel because 3 bits of clay are really not adequate to keep this thing from falling over. So what I want to do is I want to use this, I want to turn it around so that I can use the little risers to grab the pot. And where do I want to grab it? Well, I want to grab it at the fat part. So I need to pick the appropriate riser. Oh, it's going to be upside down. So in that case, I could grab it down here with a low riser on this flare, but I don't want to grab it on this slope here because it would have a tendency to tip. So I either want to grab it down here or up here. And I think I'd really rather grab it down here because I don't want those feet to be in the way when I'm trimming. So instead of using them, I'm going to use these low guys. And these will, because it's on this part of the flare, these will anchor it really well, and they will also give me free access to this whole area. Okay. Now once again, if the lip of your pot isn't level, this is going to be wiggling around, and you can see that it's not perfect. Is this level? Yeah. When your pot doesn't seem to be quite right, one place to start is to check and see if the gift and grip is properly positioned. So that's pretty good. So now I'm going to hold this pot same way as I did before. Some fingers on the outside, some on the bottom. Put my thumb on the ferrule. Take off some clay here. I guess I should have assessed the thickness of the pot. So I made this so I know what it's like, and I know sometimes when you make pots you don't know really what you've got, but I kind of know what I need to take off, and I can put a raised foot on here. I've got enough clay on the bottom to do that, but I'm not sure I'm going to do it anyway. And so first thing I need to do is follow this curve and get rid of this sticking out stuff. Okay, so that's looking pretty good. Now, it's a mug, it needs to be stable. I don't want to make this too small or it'll be too tippy. I have some lines here and it's not as graceful a curve as I'd like, so I'm going to switch to this tool. I'm going to start down here and I'm going to slide up and try to make that a little more graceful. Okay. Now, it's still not centered, and I've got two choices here. I could put a little bevel here, or I could put a raised foot on it. So I'm going to choose the more difficult one. So I'm going to come in here and that gives this guy kind of a pedestal to set on. And then I'm going to round this just a little bit on the corner. And then I'm going to dig down like I did on that other piece. And take some off in here. And then I'm going to go to the center and take some off there and slide out. And now I just need to fine tune the thickness here. And this foot is way too hefty for this pot. So I'm going to cut out closer. And notice my end position. This is steadying the tool, because if you're not careful, the tool will just rip into this foot and totally mess it up. Okay, so that's it. So that gives it a bit of a pedestal, tall skinny piece. This is a bit squatter, and I could grip this here, or I could grip it higher. This is so thick here that I really, if I didn't have to trim as much off as I do, I would use taller feet. But I know that this thing is just too fat and I need to take off a lot of clay. The inside of this is curved inward and the outside is straight out. So I really need to take off a lot of clay. So I need to take off clay up to about here. Huge amount. So I'm just going to dig into this thing with the corner of the tool. Okay. Now these lines that I cut in there serve kind of like the treads on a tire. So when the tire is bald, you know that it's worn out. Okay, so I put these grooves in here. When these grooves are gone, I know how much I've taken off because I can see how deep those grooves are. So I just remove until those grooves are gone. Okay, that gives me a sense of what I took off. So because this thing was just so heavy to begin with, I want to pick it up and look at it and check it out. It's actually feeling like it's a pretty decent weight now. Now one of the things is, before you take your pot off the wheel to check it out, you want to make sure that it goes back on the wheel exactly in the same position that it was when it came off. So, if I take this off like this, I want it to be oriented with this side toward that. So I usually make a little mark there so that if I pick it up and move it around, when I put it back, I can get this mark aligned to that. Because your pots are never going to be perfectly round, and if they're perfectly round, it wouldn't matter, but because they're not, it's good to orient them the way they are. Okay, I'm going to start cleaning up the outside with this. I'm going to put a little bevel on the outside. And I've got a line here that I put in earlier that I wish I didn't have. Okay, so that's pretty much done. It's rounded. We have a bevel. I'm going to wax right to here, right there. And if I wanted to really be neat and do a good job on this, I would fix that little groove. So I would roll out a coil of clay, get some water, put it in there where I have that little cut mark, and basically just smush that in. When I get it all patched, I would sponge it while it's spinning, and maybe even take a trim tool. And when I got done, there will be no evidence left of my boo-boo. Okay, so that's done. So, if you remember the shape before, it's quite a bit different now. Again, when you set stuff down, set it in a clean area. And, you know, if you've got stuff all over your hands and you pick up your pot, hey, guess what? It's going to have crap all over the outside. So make sure your hands are clean. And at this point, you know, you want to pick up your pot and you want to check it out. So if there's any imperfections, you can smooth off the outside. You can clean up the lip. You can make it perfect. And then you find a nice clean spot to set it in. And the next thing I want to show you is, I'm going to show you our trimming samples. So we're going to take them over here to the table. So the purpose of trimming is to get rid of extra clay that you don't need, to reduce the weight of the pot, and to make the pot a more attractive shape on the outside, and to give it a foot which is attractive, and to hide the unglazed area that you're going to have at the bottom of the pot. So there's a number of reasons why we're going to trim. So we're going to look at this example. So this is a cylindrical pot. Comes down pretty straight. It's flat on the bottom. I put a little ring in here just to make it a little more interesting. And you'll note there's a 45-degree bevel right here. And the purpose of that 45-degree bevel is that if you glaze right to that pencil line, when you look at the pot from eye level, you will not see the unglazed white area. So if this is a dark color glaze, that hides the white clay, so you don't see it. Because if it was like this, you would have to have an unglazed area all around the foot, and if this was black, you would have that white circle all the way around, and that would look terrible. Now, here are two pieces that are similar in shape. This one has an indented foot and this one doesn't. The reason this one doesn't is, well, it could be because you didn't want to, or it could be because it was too thin and you were afraid that if you indent it here, you'd go through the pot. So, if it's thin, you can do that, and if it's thick enough, you can cut in here and make a raised foot. Either one is fine, and when they're sitting on the table, they essentially look the same. So it's your choice. But if you do have extra clay, you want to get rid of the extra weight, and that's why you want to hollow that out. Now, on a curved pot that's curved like this, kind of bowl shape, you want to have the foot in an appropriate place. So the diameter of the foot should be such that the piece is not too tippy, and it shouldn't look like sumo wrestler with feet planted far apart so that you can't get knocked over. Now, here is an excellent trimming job. You can see the walls of this pot are uniform in thickness, and it's curved here, and so the foot is slightly curved. This is raised, it's very attractive. And for the pot, the foot gives it enough stability, yet gives it some lift off the table and a sense of elegance and grace that it wouldn't have if it didn't have that foot. Now, this is not good because the foot is inappropriately sized. It's way too far in, and there's this almost vertical overhang. So on this pot, the foot should have been out here where my pinky is, not quite all the way out there, and definitely not all the way in there. So when you look at the removal of clay, this is what the pot would look like when you cut it off the wheel, but when you trim it, you can see with a pencil line what you're going to remove. It helps when you make your pot if you don't have a whole lot of extra clay sticking out. So while it's on the wheel, if you take your wooden tool and while it's spinning, you cut that off, you can get rid of some of the clay that you don't want, because this has this kind of curve on the inside, and the outside of the pot needs to mimic that curve. So if we look at this side, while it was on the wheel, you could have gotten rid of at least this much clay, and then you could have done your fine tuning later. So here is a similar pot, and you can see how you could trim away and leave a raised foot, or you could put a 45-degree bevel on it. So I have two different kinds of feet, the bevel here and the raised foot there. This is pretty good. For the shape of this pot, the foot is pretty much in the right place. The inside of the bowl has this curve, and the outside of the bowl mimics that curve. It's pretty flat here, and it's pretty flat there. And this piece is to demonstrate how when you have this kind of curve on the inside, you really need to follow it on the outside. So you may have wanted the pot to look like this on the outside, but if you wanted it to look like this on the outside, then the inside would have to be sticking out. So this, if you want it this shape, then you need to alter the inside.